Mark-Morano is going to be with us for about 40 after. Then I'm going to get into Bill Gates and the death panels, and that connects into this. Bill Gates is funding all this carbon tax baloney, and they admit it's about population reduction. It's about you freezing your butt off in the dark. Mark, I want to get into ways to beat these people, and I also want to talk about population reduction with you. But what we have to remember, and I want you to speak to this, is they're not backing off. They're accelerating at the, quote, independent school district level. They are confirmed showing elementary, first, second, third, fourth, fifth grade children cartoon documentaries, same thing in Australia, where little bunny rabbits die. And I'm talking to adults, parents, everywhere, who say that their daughters and sons, when they drive by a new construction site, start crying and hate themselves. And this ties into death education and the suicides. I mean, this is making everybody guilty for having any wealth and just giving it all to these parasites so Al Gore can chase his masseuses around with his Johnson flopping about. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's what's going on here.
Yeah, you're mentioning kids here. There's a new Brendan Fraser Brooke Shields film, I think it's called Furry Revenge or something like that, and it's all geared toward kids being upset at a development project. A few years back, there was a movie about a pancake house going up in Florida, and it was all about kids being taught to glorify eco-terrorism. They went and they put in alligators on the site, to cause destruction, they vandalized the site, all to prevent the environment from being hurt. This is Hollywood, mainstream Hollywood. Carl Heissian, the author, was the one that wrote that book, and it was made into a movie. They're propagandizing our kids to be eco-terrorists.
They're building their Mal brigades.
The Discovery gunman didn't have this kind of propaganda when he was little, so you can imagine where we're going to be 30 years from now. But it's absolutely, if you look across the spectrum at what they were doing, when we went to the break, I was just explaining to you briefly, is that they've had multiple eco-scares, and when they fade away, they just plug in a new one. In the 1970s, we had the overpopulation scares, we had resource scarcity, predictions of famine, you had pesticide scares, DDT scares, you had the man-made global cooling scares. In the 80s and 90s, we had the Amazon rainforest, the deforestation, getting all the kids sad at the monkeys going homeless, their predictions the Amazon would be gone. By the way, the Amazon, for every acre cut in the tropical forest worldwide, an estimated 50 are growing back. People are leaving the jungle. They're calling them the galloping jungle. They're growing so fast. So that eco-scare faded away. Now with global warming fading away, they have so much invested in it, they're not going to let it fully fade away. But right now the UN has already come out and has a new biodiversity panel modeled after the IPCC panel. And by the way, it's exactly modeled because there's been analysis done, multiple errors all about the species. In fact, on Climate Depot today, I have a whole article on the species extinction. And what they've done, it's the same solution, different ecosystem.
Yeah, we're taking all your property because of a cave bug or a bat or a salamander. They've caught the EPA and the Forestry Service releasing endangered animals in areas where they weren't geographically as a pretext to land grab. So they're going back to that tried and trusted, we got to take your power, we've got to have you pay us taxes or the polar bears will die. It doesn't matter if their numbers are exploding off the charts. They'll just tell you they're all dead. They're teaching children in public schools that penguins are drowning when they're aquatic birds.
Oh yeah, no. What they're teaching them in public is it's a crime, and in fact, it's become what I call climate astrology. Anything in 2007, the UN basically said many bad things will happen, and guess what? Bad things always happen, and now every time a bad thing happens, it's proof that the UN is the new Nostradamus of our age. Everyone looks to, well, the UN predicted that. We have a Debbie Stabenow, the Michigan senator, who now says she believes in man-made global warming because every time she flies, the turbulence is worse. She feels global warming when she flies in the form of worse turbulence. She doesn't remember airline turbulence.
So it's total
bad.
Paranoid voodoo. Let me throw this in before we go to break and come back and get into population reduction and their numbers on that front, because I know you're an expert in that area. What about all these other things that have been proven wrong? I mean, there's so many other things that they have predicted were going to happen that haven't happened.
Yeah, I mean, going back, the DDT scare, not only was it scientifically baseless, but it probably cost millions of lives of people in Africa who couldn't face malaria. And not only that, it's inconveniencing a lot of people in big cities today with the explosion of bed bugs, because we're not allowed to use DDT to kill bed bugs. It's probably the most effective tool against bed bugs. If you go back to the 1970s, remember that we mentioned the global cooling scare, which faded away by the late 70s. Then you have the resource scarcity, famines. We had such outrageous predictions that we were using up the earth, that we wouldn't have enough food to feed everyone, that we were going to be facing, wars and conflicts based on food resource. All bogus. Everything they predicted has collapsed. The tropical rainforest, across the board, even down to our apples. You can't trust them. Whenever something turns into a, quote, crisis, you know you're being conned.
All right, climatedepot.com. I want to talk more with our guests in this final segment about solutions to expose and stop these people. And another lie, Coral Island's getting bigger. So the islands are getting bigger, not smaller. We'll be right back. Our website's on the front line, stopping this globalist takeover, or Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. ClimateDepot.com is the central clearinghouse for exposing this eugenicist fraud. I want to get into China rethinks its controversial one-child policy. And they go on to admit here that rich people were already allowed to have more than one child. Party members could do whatever they wanted. But that now they don't have enough young people to pay for the social welfare net, even though it's tiny in China. And that they're talking about getting rid of it because they've dropped below 1.7 replacement rate. The average Westerner's 1.3. You have 2 adults, and they don't replace themselves. They have 1.3 children on average. The United States has that average, except for our giant immigrant influx. We're dying. But there I was in a convenience store Friday, and I'm up at the counter, and they're talking about how they're about to ban plastic bags in Austin. And I've read the studies about how pulp causes more toxins, more chemicals, more acid, more problems. They don't care. It's about making you take their light bulbs, making you accept what type of toilet you can have, making you accept federal inspections of your house, making you accept no plastic bags. It's about them being the bosses. Going back to mark-morano. Mark, how do we stop these people? And B, get into population reduction? Because from my research, that's the heart of what they're all about.
Yeah, well, first of all, I had to stop. The most single effective thing Americans did to stop the congressional climate bill was 2 words: mockery and ridicule. And it wasn't the Tea Parties. It was the town halls in the summer of 2009 when congressmen went home to their districts having just voted, and including some Republicans like Sonny Bono's widow, just voting for the congressional cap and trade bill. They were booed, jeered, ridiculed, laughed at in town halls when they tried to talk about global warming and the alleged consensus. That had more of an impact. That scared U.S. senators. That scared people like what's his name in Minnesota, Al Franken, to run scared and bail out of the global warming bill. I mean, hardcore leftists got so afraid of public outrage. So that's one of the biggest things we can do. Al Gore now gives speeches in Oregon, Florida. He's booed out of the hall. We have hundreds of protesters out there chanting, interrupting his speech. Civility has to go out the window. Confront your congressman, confront your local officials. Don't let them have a moment's moral superiority when it comes to global warming. Tell them you know.
Oh, they love their fake moral superiority, their arrogantness.
And on